Sad times. You has come to an end. The final season has hit Netflix, and it is over. And I am here to discuss it. Um, yeah, I'm a fan of the series, so yeah, a little bit disappointed that it has come to an end. But lots has gone on, and you know, I'll get into it a little bit. I'm going to assume that, you know, those watching is familiar with you, maybe watched, some of the other seasons. Um, I'm not going to rehash everything that's happened in the entire series. I don't remember if I did, but I may or may not have reviewed at least, some of the other seasons. I don't know if every single one. Um, but I'm not going to rehash the whole story here. I'm going to assume that the basics of it. The IMDb plot, I'll read it here in a second. Just kind of an overview of the series, not necessarily specific to what's happening in season 5. But it says a dangerously charming, intensely obsessive young man goes to extreme measures to insert himself into the lives of those he is transfixed by. So the basics are, if he loves you, he's willing to go to extreme measures to keep your love and keep you protected and so forth. And that's what we kind of see over the course of Joe Goldberg's life. So with that, I'm kind of debating about it in my head. I'm not going to guarantee I'm going to leave everything spoiler free here. I kind of have some thoughts on the end sequence here that I want to mention, and that may kind of give away some things. So I'm going to proclaim that this review is not spoiler free. So if you've not seen season 5 and you really don't want to know what goes on, or maybe how it ends and so forth, or maybe tipped off in how it ends, maybe you want to check out now. But if you've already seen it and you're looking for some thoughts on it or whatever, maybe you want to hang in there, and that is fine. Again, I'm not gonna rehash the whole series here. Basically, the season picks up, almost where it left off. He's starting his life, or almost back where we started, back in I think it's New York. He even ends up back in the bookstore at a certain point, kind of reopening that. He started this new life off with another woman, his next fling, his next you, whatever you want to say. She has more money. That kind of helps him, get going here. They've kind of left, some of the stuff that happened in London, I believe it was where they were there, and they're hoping for things to change here. He brought his son along, obviously not her son, but she's kind of adopted him. He's a little bit older now, and very impressionable, and he can walk and talk and that kind of thing. He plays a little bit of a role. We get to see him from time to time in it. We meet some of her family members. Her family members, like Kate's family members, play a role in what's going to happen this time around. And, a little bit of the story partakes in a family battle over the company. She's kind of taken over for her father. Not all of her family members are exactly pleased about it. Early on, we find that maybe one of them is going to release some information about her past, so that she has to step down from her role, and obviously that means she's getting threatened, which obviously means Joe has to step in, and he wants to solve the problem his way, and we know what way that is. She's kind of wanting to let that kind of go, that life that she lived before, and trying to get him to also kind of let that go, but almost ends up not really having a choice, and he ends up having to kill a family member, and then that kind of just escalates things as opposed to solving the problem. Like I said, he's going to get along with some of the family members, not. She gets along with some and not others. There's twins. They play an important role in what goes on here. And this story just kind of spins a little bit more out of control as it goes. Um, Obviously, in typical you fashion, we have, him and his life with the current person, and eventually he's going to meet somebody else that's going to be maybe the future you, the future person that he's going to focus on. Of course, at the on start of it, he kind of fights it, but, we're going to end up going down this hole because he just can't help himself. Um, Obviously, kind of destroying his current life and maybe, transitioning now to possible new life. Um, I would have to say, as that's kind of the story here, there's a little bit more to it. I'll jump into that in a second. But, um, I thought, again, going into the season, kind of watching it, we're the anticipation really is as you're watching it, or at least as I was watching it, is where is this going to end? How is it going to end? Is he going to die? Is someone in his past going to come back and get him? You see kind of a few doors opening to the possibilities as this everything kind of goes on. Obviously, this new you that's going to appear. She's going to play, as soon as you kind of get an introduction to her, you're kind of hinted at, oh, okay, this is the one that's going to ultimately do him in. As you see her, you're kind of like, okay, who is she? When are we going to find out who she is? Because she must have something tied in with something of his past. It's just too obvious. It's too part of the story. Knowing that the series is going to end, you just know it. She's not there because of, bad luck for her and so forth. It is just, too kind of obvious that she's going to be the one. He's had several women along the way. But she's going to be, Bronte is the one that's going to put the end to him. And it's just, who is she eventually? So, they kind of go along with the story. He's fighting, he's got the family thing going on. He's got this introduction to Bronte. We get to learn a little bit about her. He learns a little bit about her. And, as you're watching it, you're like, who is she? And I think that is, the thing that kind of holds you, as we get an introduction to her. Eventually, they do tell you who she is. And I will say, I have to say, I thought she would have been more important to, a certain character from the past. And I guess, while she was there, she wasn't as important. So it was a little bit awkward. I guess, it's kind of doing that thing we're thinking, she's a cousin, she's a sister or something like that. And she really wasn't. So I kind of credit and don't credit them for that. It's like they could have easily gone that route and, you'd be like, okay, well, why didn't we meet that character before? But in turns, just, she ends up being a friend to one of the characters he, it wasn't too great to along the way. And she's kind of there partly for revenge. They do a decent job of twisting and turning it. And there's twist and turn in the story. It gets to a point, an aha moment, and a moment where he does end up killing somebody and getting caught killing somebody. And you think, oh, but, it seems almost like a little too early. And you're like, well, how's he going to get out of this? I thought they handled that really well. That was a little bit of a shocker. You're kind of, again, thinking in your head, like, certain things are happening, whatever. Then it happens, and you're like, okay, well, this is what they've been up to the entire time. So, while it's maybe shocking, but then you take a step back and you're like, oh, okay. I kind of see that happening. But then, it's not the end of the story. The story kind of has to go on. And, in, again, the same fashion with some of the other stories, the more this goes on, the more important Bronte becomes. And then, she's not on his side. You think she's on his side, but not really on his side to begin with. Then she is, then she isn't. It's kind of a back and forth. Again, kind of, you're just waiting for her to put the nail in the coffin. But then she has competition. Kate is still, gets to a point where, she's had it with Joe. Joe's crossed the line with some of the family stuff that goes on. there, and I'm not really getting into great detail about that, but there's a whole thing that goes on there, and some craziness in that as well. So we get that angle to it. So it comes down to is Kate gonna do him in? Is Bronte gonna do him in? Is a ghost from the past going to do him in? And I think they do a pretty good job of coming full circle here. We end up, like I said, back at the store, which means we're back in the box. The box plays a role in it. He's going to end up in the box. Several people end up in the box. It is kind of fun to be back there. It's obviously an important part of who he is and how he became the way he is. So it is good that they kind of revisit that and kind of went back there. That obviously plays an important role of towards throughout the season, but obviously towards the end here. Obviously, as it kind of winds down, and you're like, it's an interesting thing because as you're watching it, you're kind of like, or at least for me, I'm kind of like, okay, he is a bad character. He is the serial killer, basically. You're not supposed to root for him, but he is the main character here. So it is like, what do you want to happen to him? Do you want him to get what he deserves, and probably which is death? Are they going to kill him? I mean, they're going to put a definitive end to all of this, where maybe somewhere down the line, he doesn't come back permanently. You think along the lines of Dexter. I mean, at any point, you really just want to kill Dexter so he never comes back. Or do you want to kind of leave it as, okay, well, maybe he's hurt or injured or taken off somewhere and can come back at some point. So you're kind of battling that. So, as we go further on, it is thinking in your head, what do I want for this character? Again, he's the main character. Do I want him to die? He's a bad person. He probably deserves it. Do I want him just to go to prison? Is that, fitting for him? Do I want everything of his past to be released so everybody knows who he is and what a bad person he is? Is that fulfilling enough? Again, but he's the, to me it was a battle. It's like, what, do I really want it to end for him? Am I going to feel bad for him in any part of it? And I think, one of the things that happens in this, and, maybe it's because of the time in between, and we got a little bit of you before, and then, it kind of went through the COVID thing where we had a long pause, and then kind of came back, and, even a pause between 4 and 5, to kind of almost forget, how, brutal he can be. And I guess when he's brutal against, a guy, it's fine, whatever. But there are moments in this movie where he's very brutal to the other women. He can be very loving and want to protect, but he can also be the extreme opposite. And, he, has some scenes, especially in the end, where he's fighting Bronte. And, she's getting the brunt of it. I mean, he does some really harsh and heavy stuff to her. And it's kind of in those moments that maybe you're thinking, no, he deserves to die. And you maybe take that step back that, yeah, he's the main character, but, and so in a certain way you're rooting for him. But then when he does that and you see that and you grasp the impact of that, you're kind of like, no, whatever he gets, he's probably going to deserve. So for me watching it, that was one of the things that I was feeling. I was feeling, the anxiousness of it ending and kind of trying to guess how it was going to end, and then kind of, having times where I was rooting for him, like just escape and go somewhere else, and maybe that's the end of it. Or maybe he will find that happy ending. Maybe it is with Bronte and he can just do it and finally calm down and finally, find the last you and just make it happen, and that's it. But then there are the other moments, even with her, with the fights with Kate. He has a couple of scenes with her, a big moment there. So it is, a constant back and forth there. Every time he does that, then it's like, no, whatever he gets, he probably deserves. So kind of a jumping of emotions there. And I think that when you have that, I think as the show, you've kind of, done a service. You've kind of done what you've one of the things you've done to set out is engage the audience and get them feeling stuff, and they had me feeling stuff there as this was going on. I would say, when it ends, we kind of get that, where certain characters that are still left at the end kind of end up. And, I guess there's some one or two characters I kind of really didn't care for. So I was like, kind of like, not really happy that they got where they ended up. So like, couldn't have killed them or couldn't have something worse happened to them. Like I said, the twins are going to play an interesting role in this one. And one in particular that kind of stands out. She ends up being a fun character and a bit of a comic relief, but of it a little bit in a way. But obviously, a character that comes a long way, and she was a very good part of the story and kind of gave some of that entertainment in between, some of the intenser stuff. I would say Bronte, I was a little annoyed by, and obviously not, when I say, characters who end up in a certain place, maybe he wasn't so excited about, her ending or whatever. I mean, she is the one who, is Joe's undoing. So I wasn't completely happy, that she kind of got a happy ending, even though, he does get what he deserves, whatever. And there was another character too, I'll leave that out. I thought, where they leave the boy was interesting. Obviously, as they painted, as the little bit you do get to see of it, obviously you get to see his ending relationship with his father, how that kind of leaves off. But you get to see a little bit about the boy as it is. And, maybe, at the end of the day, this is the end of Joe. But I think, that maybe they left the door open for, something of the son at some point, maybe when he's a little bit older. Maybe a sequel, spinoff, whatever you want to call it, with his son, and where his son kind of maybe picks up and does some of the similar stuff that he did, and maybe another way they can rerun the series or keep it alive in some way or whatever. I think that's an interesting point there, how they left that. Obviously, too young now, but, they could fast forward, in a couple of years and pick up, him fast forwarding his life and him kind of maybe go down a similar path. Could be, we'll see, as we've seen, like I mentioned Dexter before, like we've seen with Dexter. We got full-blown Dexter now. We got, Dexter, in the future, Dexter in the past, Dexter all over the place. So you never know. As far as where the final scene here and the final moments of it, he does end up in jail. We do see him. He gives, as he kind of gets arrested and whatever, and we see, we get told kind of the, what happened to him and so forth, and then we get the recap of certain characters. You're kind of, they kind of hold you for a moment before you ultimately, you're like, okay, when are we going to get back to him? What is going to be his final moment? And then, he's there in the jail, and then he's kind of like, he can't believe that he's there. And, he kind of has another comment about you. And I think, almost the end of it is a little bit hilarious in a way, because, as he's kind of there sitting in his cell, and, he's kind of saying a few things, then he lays down, and he basically opens a letter, and it is, and he kind of makes mention to it, of the next you, or you in a different way, of the familiar thing of having people fall in love with people who are in jail. We know it, and we see it, other serial killers, have been known to get married and whatever, and have all kinds of groupies and whatever while they're in jail. And this is just the beginning for him. And I thought that, kind of, ending it on that kind of funny note that, he's opening a letter, seeing a woman that if he was out in the real world, might be his next you, but now he's kind of entrapped in a cage, can't do anything about it, but they're still there. So it is something that he can feed on, spin his mind on, or whatever. I thought it was a little funny. Don't know if you guys seen it, but Love After Lockup is another show that's on TV, kind of crazy, where people who are out of jail fall in love with people in jail, and then you get to see their crazy lives as these people get out of jail. And, I've watched that show. Yes, I do admit to that. it kind of made me think of that and that kind of craziness, and maybe, you know, if we had a Joe getting out of jail and kind of doing that thing, how crazy that would be and how fun that might be. But that would be all interesting in itself. So, you know, kind of some different thoughts there. So, you know, so I can't say at the end of the day, you know, happy or pleased with, you know, where he ended up. You know, I think, you know, that moment was fun in thinking about, you know, that being his life from here on out. And I guess it kind of fits, you know, and almost being a also self-torture. But, you know, also, again, disappointed that maybe he didn't escape somewhere, or that, you know, he could come back at another time, or you know, I guess, you know, thinking that he was going to die, you know, he wanted to, but I think, you know, that would have been the easy way out. And again, I don't think that would have fit. And obviously, you know, they wanted him to have the final word, in which he did. So, you know, I don't think, you know, while you thought that might be an option, you know, I don't think it never truly was. So overall, you know, you know, I don't know what your guys' thoughts on it. I really enjoyed the series, enjoyed the character. Again, you know, especially in this season, you know, maybe it would happen in some other ones. It's been a while since I saw some of the other seasons, but definitely felt some of his intensity in this one, and his moments of killing, and really, you know, as you know, he kind of grown on it. You know, early on, you know, he really wasn't necessarily a killer, but kind of grew into it and just became better at it more and more. He is rusty on it in some moments here, and it is funny. There are some funny moments in this one, where, you know, you almost thought he hit his prime, and now he's kind of age has kind of caught up with him, and he's not as good as he thought in certain moments. But definitely there are other times where he's very intense and very much into the fighting, and it is felt. So again, interesting character, another, you know, good serial killer kind of series. Obviously, if you've not watched it and you're still listening to this review, I basically ruined a lot for you. But if you have not watched it and watched it in whole, maybe you want to binge it now, please do so. You know, again, you know, I mentioned Dexter a couple of times, but, you know, different characters, different things going on there. But I think you'll enjoy it. I enjoyed it. I don't know, you know, I want to give it a Pool of Blood rating. You know, like I said, I think I've reviewed at least maybe one or two of the other seasons. You know, if I have to, I'm going to give it 4 pools of blood as far as this season. Again, you know, a lot's like, obviously, there's more to be said. Obviously, there's you know, some twists and turns within Bronte and who she is and how she gets started. There's an unexpected twist, you know, not just involved with her, but someone she's involved with. Things like that. So I thought they did a good job of kind of keeping you on your toes. And at the end, I think I was overall pleased, even, you know, small minor annoyances here and there, but overall still pleased with where it went. And as far as the series, you know, I don't know, I want to give a Pool of Blood to the entire series. I can definitely say I recommend it. I definitely can say that if you've not seen any of it and you want to binge it now, do it now. You'll enjoy it. And you know, if they do something with the son at some point, I will definitely be interested in seeing what they do, and if they can kind of make it something unique in its own, where you know, maybe it is him but in a different way, and maybe carry it in, and something that doesn't maybe feel like it's a remake, but, you know, can kind of carry on the legacy of what's going on here. So yeah, I think that's it, and recommending it, and hopefully you guys see it, and definitely interested in your guys' thoughts. So definitely in the comment section or on Twitter, Facebook, which is down below. Feel free to reach out and talk about the series. I'm game for it. So horrorsquarereviews.blogspot.com is where you can find all my reviews. Written video are there. Obviously lots of video reviews for a while now, so you can like and subscribe and do everything else that everybody wants you to do here on YouTube. But if not, it is okay, no worries. I thank you for your time regardless, especially if you sat through this and I ruined it all for you if you have not seen it. Twitter, Facebook, information down below, like I said, and definitely the comment section. Your thoughts on this season, the series, I welcome it. And with that, I'll catch you in the next review, horror fans.